This is Tucker, who bit me about 2 seconds after I came into the house, and you can see he's a ferocious dog. He's just really, this is Tucker, and Jessie is over here off camera, but this is going to be the roadmap to success. Now, Tucker is a great dog, and I'm going to put you down in a second, buddy, but I need you a little bit on camera just so that people know what we're talking about. Yes. Now, he's nipped a couple people and drawn blood once, and I think a lot of it is based on he didn't really have any rules and structure, and he was a little bit confused in his position. Now, he's struggling to get away. If I let him just kind of peel out and then run away, then that's kind of the energy that he leaves me with. That's the last thing is you remember it's also not a balanced way to go. So I'm going to put him down. I'm going to wait for him to stop. And that's a little bit of microcosm of what we went over in this session is stopping when the dog starts getting too excited. The Guardian actually, you're gonna eat my hand sanitizer. There's a little sunroom right out here. You can't see it on camera, but basically the dogs kind of hang out there. And when the Guardian, and they put the dogs in there when they're leaving. One of the dogs, Jessie, goes to the door and digs at it. And that causes the Guardians to rush to the door and open it over really quick before he damages the door. Well, for dogs, they learn through association. So if I do this and that makes my humans come in and let me out, then that's the proper way to ask them to let me out. So one of the things we talked about off camera during the session is what we call a negative punishment. Negative means removing something from the equation. That's why we call it negative. And so for one of these things, what I do is if I have a dog who's really excited, when I come to the door, as soon as I open the door, the dogs get excited, I close the door and I stay outside. I let them see me and I just completely ignore them. I don't tell them what to do. I just relax and wait. As soon as their energy calms down, because they can't stay frantic forever, when that calms down, then I start to open the door again. As soon as they get excited, I stop. And you'll have a back and forth game doing this over and over until eventually they realize when I'm calm, the human comes in. When I'm excited, the human goes away. Well, I want them to come towards me, so I'm going to stay calm. The problem is, if the dog is scratching up your door, you're going to have a damaged door. So that's part of the problem. So what I suggest the Guardians do in this case is go to Lowe's or Home Depot, get a piece of plexiglass and have them cut it the exact width for your door. They'll cut it for you. And then basically get some 3M Velcro tape. Put a little bit of it on the outside of the door and put a little bit on the plexiglass and put it there. If it's shaped properly, measured properly, he can scratch all day long on the plexiglass. He can't get his claw or his nails into it. And if we scratch the plexiglass, we don't care. It protects our door and it allows us affords us the ability to just be nice and relaxed. I don't care if you scratch. Scratching is not going to get me to come in. I think inadvertently, from talking with the Guardians, they had done a lot of things that confused the dogs into thinking, especially Tucker, that he needs to be protective or possessive of them. He really didn't have any rules. He got exercise more than a lot of my clients do, but probably could use a little bit more exercise. And he was able to tell the Guardians when to pet him. And so he got petted. If I have a job where I have no rules and I get to tell the boss when to pay me and there's no consequences, I'm going to be not very good employee. And so he basically, I think, really thought the world was his oyster. But when he told the humans what to do, like, don't go outside, some other dog might take advantage of you, and the humans don't listen to him, that stresses him out, just like it stresses us out as humans. I could tell immediately when I first came in that he had cortisol in his blood, which is a stress hormone. It gives us that fight or flight response. It helps accelerate our breathing, gives that heightened sense of alertness. But also it's not healthy for the dog or humans to be in that state of mind for too long. And I think that him being also a puppy, there's just a lot of factors I think that were contributing to him being a little bit confused. So one of the things we did was we went over how we can add rules and structure. So for the structure, or for the rules, I should say, he's already not supposed to be on the furniture, but he still kind of gets up from time to time. I recommend the Guardians perhaps get some X pads for rooms that he might go into. An X pad, we can just lay it out. It's got little nubs that it makes it uncomfortable for the dogs to lay down. So we take away the ability to get on the furniture. The higher a dog sits, the more rank or status they have. We have cats in the house. The cats are declawed. If they're clawed, then they wouldn't have this problem. The cats would have sorted this out. But the cats we will do up here, but not the dogs, because for dogs, the higher they sit, like I said, the more rank or status they have. So eventually, if the Guardians decide, I'd like to invite Tucker on the furniture, it's with the Guardians' direction. He pulls down the bag, all his toys, but it's with an invitation because this is a privilege. And so if they invite Tucker up here, it's with an invitation, and it's only for good behavior. So if he's up here and starts barking at something he sees out the window, you have to get down. Or if he's up here and he gets down to get a drink of water, when he comes back, he would need another invitation to get back up. I'm going to forget this later, so I'm going to show it out now. One of the things I like to do is teach dogs directional commands. Tucker, here. Let's say that this is a doorway, and this is the hallway out here, and I want Tucker to leave the room. Telling a dog to leave, unless we teach them how to do it, is difficult. So to teach a dog to do this, what I do is I show them that I have a treat, I toss it right outside the room, out. When the dog licks it up off the floor, I would say the word out. They come back, and I do it a second time. Out. So I'm helping them practice leaving the room and having something positive happen when they do, and I'm assigning it a command word, out. So one of the things I'd have the guardians do is go to every room in the house and practice throwing a treat outside. And if one dog is specifically getting, Jessie is a little bit older, but they're pretty athletic. But if Tucker's always getting it, we might practice with Jessie too, or Jessie separately, so the dogs practice doing this by themselves. I usually do this like 2 treats from every room or area that I ask them to leave, once a day for each dog for about a week. After a week, you should be able to say out, and they run outside the room automatically. Now, so one of the other rules is not being allowed in the kitchen when the guardians are cooking food or around the table when they're eating. Now, I promised the guardians I would show them how to achieve this. I haven't done that yet at this point of this filming, so I'm going to do that as soon as we get done doing this. But what I want the guardians to remember is to do practice first. So microwave the bacon that I'm going to talk about, or the roast beef, or the Canadian bacon. Pretend like you're cooking or eating, so you do a practice or a warm-up. And then the dog's going to try to break the perimeter. You're going to use the third escalating consequence, marching towards the dog until it gets outside the perimeter. Then we stop. Wait for the dog to be stationary. When it's stationary, take 1 step back. Left, right, or right, left. I did that inverted. And wait a quarter second. The dog stays still, then take another left 2 steps backwards and pause a quarter second. So you're doing a very measured way. When dogs communicate through movement, they do a lot of pausing. So if you just start backing away, or you turn and face this way, remember your authority goes whatever direction your chest is pointing at. So if this is the kitchen, I march the dogs out, and then I turn to go back in the kitchen. Now my authority is pointing this way, the dog will race right back in. So a lot of times I step backwards, step, step, stop. Step, step, stop. And I do that until I get to whatever area. Then I grab the pot or the pan, or I simulate, but I'm watching the dog. As soon as the dog starts coming forward, I hiss before it breaks the boundary. And once it breaks the boundary, I rush right towards it. And I almost want to startle it. And once it backs up and it gets across the boundary, I stop. So I might not always have to go all the way to the edge of the boundary in order to enforce it. Now, when we're cooking, we're thinking about cooking and the steps to make sure our meal is prepared properly. Well, now we're distracted. So if we practice with the roast beef, or like I was talking about earlier, what I'm going to talk about when we do this off camera, you help the dog practice the behavior first when we can pretend like we're cooking, but we're really giving them our full attention. And then once the dog lays down beyond the boundary, as he lays down on command, on timing, then I put the bacon away, and then I actually do my real preparing of the food. I do the same thing for eating. I just microwave a piece of bacon, sit down with place settings, and pretend like we're cutting that bacon up, and the dog violates the boundary, we get up and march towards them. In this room, what I would probably do is I'd probably say that the rule would be the dog's not allowed to come off the carpet in that direction. The kitchen is basically behind where we're filming this. And so there's a nice edge of the carpet, and that's the boundary. Now, we have a baby gate. What we might do temporarily while we're starting to enforce this is bring the baby gate in here, or the puppy playpen, and setting it up so maybe there's a choke point. There's only a little area that we have to defend. So that makes it easier for us to negate the dog's athletic ability and help them practice the behavior that we want. Sorry, he's trying to steal something off of the deal. So I stood up to give myself more authority. And they walked away. Come. A little passive training. Yes. And he's a bit of a licker. Does he lick you guys like nonstop? Licking can be a third way of marking. Now, if I pet him when he does this, that'd be reinforcing. So sit, sit. Sit. This is what I sit. This is actually what I call petting with a purpose and passive training simultaneously. Let me explain what they are. If he jumps up on me, he's trying to claim me, number one. It's inappropriate, number two. And if I pet him when he does that, he's demanding attention. I'm validating, yes, you're in charge of me. So when he jumped up on me, what I did is I used my hand to kind of motivate him to get off. Then when he sat down, I petted him and said the word sit. Now, I would actually direct him away and then tell him to sit, tell him to lie down, tell him to do something else. So when you tell the human what to do, nothing happens as a dog. But if the human tells you what to do and you do it, you get a reward. So the more that this happens, the more the dog will start to emulate that behavior. After a while, the dog will come and sit in front of you to prepay for attention. When he does, make sure you reach over and pet him and say the word sit. Remember, when you're petting, try to pet under the chin if all things are equal. Help the dog's nose come up. That's what they do when they feel proud. Also say just the command word. A lot of us say good dog or go potty or bad this. Don't caveman talk, because they only hear really the first sound that they say, or it's easiest for them to hear it. Maybe it's a better way to put that. And so if we put the more important word second, if we caveman or baby talk, that makes it harder for the dog to understand. Also, a lot of times we use a lot of variants of the same word. Come here, over here. Here, boy, dog's name, whistle, tap my thigh. Now, if you speak English, those all make the same thing. To a dog, those are all unique command words that have to be memorized. The more words you make them memorize, the more work it is, the harder it is for them to do it. It's much easier for us to only say come, or here, or sit, or crash, or whatever it is. So just say just the command word. So if he tells me what to do, nothing happens other than me telling him what to do. And when he does it, he gets rewarded. If he's already sitting here, ask him to come sit here or lay down. After a while, like I said, he'll start prepaying for attention. When he does, make sure we recognize that. Otherwise, he'll go back to jumping up and scratching at us because that gets attention. We want to reward him for doing the desired actions and behaviors. Even if you want to pet him yourself, still ask him to sit and then pet him for sitting. And I need to pet him for 8 hours after that. He just has to do something to change his state or prepay for attention. Now, the other thing I did when Jessie came over here, when you're watching the playback, he came over and sat on his own. Now, I asked for a sit here, so I think Jessie was thinking about that. Passive training is waiting for the dog to do the behavior organically without any influence whatsoever. So every time the dog comes to you, you should pet the dog and say, come. Every time the dog sits down next to you, pet it and say, sit. And this is not me luring it or waiting, just telling it. I'm just waiting for it to do it on its own and just recognizing it. So I use a couple of watchwords to help us remember these things. I say paycheck if I see someone's petting the dog that it's standing and I suspect they may have forgotten to pet with a purpose. If somebody says paycheck to me, I'm petting the dog, I immediately stop. I tell the dog to sit. When it sits, I pet him on the chin and say sit. And I say, actually, you didn't see me ask it to do it a minute ago. You missed it. That's okay, but if we argue about it before, then the dog's like, oh, they're on their own page. I can be on my own page too. So that's, for passive training and petting with a purpose, are the two easiest things that you can do. The watchword I use for passive training is recognize. So if I'm in the room and somebody says recognize, I look at the dog, and whatever the dog, if he's standing there, I would say come. If he's sitting, I would pet him and say sit. You have 3 seconds, remember, to correct or reward your dog for them to have the ability to make the connection, but it has to be repeated over and over. Also, avoid repeating the same command word. The more you say it, the less you mean it, and you will actually program your dog to ignore specific command words. And if you got to the point where you've said come, and your dog never comes, sometimes it's better just to throw come away and just start saying here or attention or atun, come up with a foreign language or whatever. You can say blue if you want, but just a word. I like using funny command words. I talked about it off camera, but using funny command words and humor can really have a positive influence. I like to make sure the guardians are eating before they feed the dogs. And that's actually something else we're going to do off camera here in a second. So make sure that when you do the feeding, you put the food down, probably in the pantry. We're not allowing the dogs to come in. We're going to walk away from the door once they've settled, and then we're going to eat a chip or a cracker, something that takes 5 or more bites. Then we're going to invite, here's chewing the basket. Come. Anything a dog is doing when you pet it is what you're reinforcing. Anything a dog does in your presence that you don't disagree with, you're giving 2 thumbs up to. So if you choose on it and I don't object, sit. Then I'm saying that's okay. So now remember, anything he's doing when you pet him is also what you're reinforcing. So if he's nervous and you pet him, you're going to make him more nervous. Excited, more excited. Jumps up on you, yeah, I'm in charge of the humans. So that's why petting with a purpose and passive training are so helpful. Also, he likes to scent mark. He walks along the side of the couch, dragging his shoulder on it. That's a way of marking it. So if you see him doing that, you have to disagree with that as well. Now going back to feeding, what we're going to do is we're going to go in the room, put the food in, then we're going to eat a couple bites of a chip or a cracker or something. Then we're going to invite Jessie to come in first because he's the older dog and he's the better behaved dog. We want to give him more status. So he eats before Tucker. When Jessie comes in and starts eating, we wait. And as soon as Jessie walks away from the bowl, even if he leaves food in the bowl, we pick up the bowl, we dump the food out, we put the empty bowl back down. He does not eat again until the next meal. Once he leaves the room, then we invite Tucker in. Now, I like to use passive training to give dogs a command word to eat. I have 4 dogs. I say grub, chow, eat, and feast. I did not come up with the word eat. Somebody else did. But the way I assign that is when my dog, whose word is chow, takes his first bite of food, I say the word chow. The other 3 dogs in the room, they hear chow too, but there's no food in their mouth. So for context, it doesn't mean anything to them. But the dog that's eating, I hear chow and I'm eating. So chow means permission to eat. So I would come up with a unique command word for both dogs. Sit. Now right there he sat, the guardian can't do it because he's filming me, but even if your 2 dogs too far away, you can say the command word. But after a while, this helps the dogs see the humans as having more authority because they're eating first. Then Tucker sees Jessie eating next, so he has more authority because he is the senior dog. And then when Jessie's eating, Tucker's not allowed in the room because for a dog to try to challenge for something is when they invade personal space. So if Tucker comes in the room while Jesse's eating, Jesse's going to feel like I need to protect my food or move away if he feels intimidated. So instead what we're going to do is just not allow him in the room. And if the dog goes and sniffs the bowl and walks away, pick it up without any sympathy and dump the food out and put the empty bowl back down. It's important to put the empty bowl back down on the floor. And then that dog does not eat it again until the next meal. Don't over-encourage. Eating is not something we need to reward them for doing. It is a reward in itself. And if they think that you really want them to eat and they don't eat, and that helps them retain power, they're going to continue doing that. So as soon as you walk away, the food goes away and the empty bowl is there to remind you that the bowl is empty, the bowl is empty, the bowl is empty until the next meal. Then you get another opportunity to do it. If your dog goes longer than 3 days without eating, then message me. But usually only when dogs do that, the only reason that's the case is somebody's cheating by giving them some other food. Now, we talked about not giving the dogs people food, which we have done in the past in this house. Dogs are allergic and certain foods are toxic to them. Avocado, onion, garlic, raisins, grapes, the green stalks of tomato plants, a lot of roots, and most nuts. There's some other things as well, but those are those are the highlights. So we don't want to give the dog any people food because to be within 7 feet of a human's eating is a way of challenging for their food. And if we invite him up and give him some food off my plate, I'm training him to do something morally he knows he shouldn't do. Now, we also went over a leave it exercise off camera up here. If you can't remember how to do that, you get confused, message me. I have hundreds of videos showing me how to do this. I can easily send you a link. You can watch it, pause it, slow it down. Same thing for any of these exercises we're going over. We did a video outside about some loose leash walking tips. Now, I'm gonna have to take this over here so I can watch it a little bit better. Now, his job as a puppy is to push the boundaries and try to get away with what he can get away with. My job as the authority figure is to enforce it consistently. Now, if I think that he's going to chew this again and I have to go to the bathroom, I'm going to put this away. I'm not going to provide temptation for him to do this. We also showed the dogs how to go to the dog bed, and we put the dog bed in the room. For the dogs really to be excluded from the group is a punishment, so I like the dog in the room, and I prefer to put the dog bed under the TV, because when we're watching TV, the dog's like, look, they're just staring at me the whole time. We're just watching TV. So it's not social for them to be excluding themselves, and one of the dogs likes hiding under the table here off the side of the room. That's not a very healthy way to be. We want the dog to be inclusive with us in the room. Let me see. We also talked about starting an exercise journal. Guardians might want to do that for about 3 to 4 weeks. Just write down the date at the top, then write each dog's name, create a column for each dog, write down the time, the minutes of the walk, if we did the warm-up, like the stuff we talked about in the video above, or played fetch, or used the laser to run laps, or whatever it is. Write all those things down, and then if he has an outburst, or he chews something up, or does something wrong, write down the time and what he did and what else was going on around it. And then at the end of the day, give each dog a letter grade. Okay, Jessie got an A- and Tucker got a C. Well, okay, tomorrow we're going to exercise Tucker a little bit more. We're going to add him an extra walk or a couple more revolutions with the laser or whatever it is. And then after a while you find a combination. You're like, wow, that was an A+ day from Tucker. Now we know the formula. Also, if you put in the other things that he's doing that are problematic, then we can start seeing every time it's longer than 3 hours since he's gotten exercise, that's when he gets really barky or growly. Now the Guardians, they have a bunch of toys here, but they probably could use getting a couple more. Is this a fake antler? Yeah, this is a fake antler. I would get a real antler. This is, a nylobone that's shaped like an antler. This is the shape of an elk antler. Now this one is cut in half. Get the full antler because they really like chewing on stuff. I also like to give my dogs real bones. So they have hard stuff, plushy stuff, pull toys, balls. They have an assortment of stuff to go through. Now, if you go to the Green Spot, bully sticks are one of the things I recommend. Ask the Green Spot to get their odor-free bully sticks. Odor-free, there's 2 odor-frees. There's like, doesn't smell, and then there's odor-free, it doesn't smell. And I like the ones where it doesn't smell on either end. Now, the things that I like to get, and you can ask the staff at the Green Spot, but I like to get kneecaps, chicken feet, duck feet, turkey feet, tracheas, bully sticks, which are bull penises that are dried out. They also have cod skin. They have all sorts of different stuff. So ask the staff there. They're very nice. They're very knowledgeable, and that coupon will get you $5 off whatever you get at the Green Spot. But the key is they'll tell, you might also want to talk to them about food, because sometimes the food that we feed our dog isn't the best, and it gives them gas. And sometimes dogs that eat poop, it's because they're not getting certain nutrients in their food. So you might want to mention that to them as well. Let me see what else. If he continues with the leash problem, let me know. We can actually set up a training session to do a little bit more for that. I think the Guardian was doing pretty good with it. The only wild card is he's very reactive to people and dogs on walks. So remember, if he gets reactive, your dog is reacting, the best thing you do is increase the distance between them and whatever they're reacting to. That's the best in the moment thing to do. However, another thing to do is to pay attention to your dog. So if you see a dog at the end of the block, turns the corner, it's way at the end of the block, turn and watch your dog as you're walking towards that dog. You might start noticing that he pulls his ears forward, he lowers his head and stares, he turns his head to the side and starts yawning, or gets down in a crouch position. Sometimes we miss the signs. So if your dog is communicating, I'm not comfortable with that dog getting closer, I'm still not comfortable, why are you still walking towards that dog? And for the dog's point of view, is like, you're leading me to doom because we're walking on a sidewalk and they're walking down the sidewalk towards us.